Today in this video, I'll be showing you all who is the fastest web host and also who are the slowest. You ever ask someone about what's the best web host and they just recommended a company with no real proof? I wanted to fix that. So what I've done for this test, I've recorded the performance and uptime of 25 different web hosting companies for 1 whole year. And today in this video, I'll show you my results of companies that perform really well and also companies that did not perform well. And don't worry, I won't sit here and say, well, all the hosting companies are good, like you've probably seen on many blogs, right? No, I want to provide real value. So I'll be showing you companies that I recommend and also companies to avoid. Now, before we talk about these results, let me first explain how I got these results and how I monitor these web hosts for 1 year. I purchased web hosting accounts from each of these companies and I installed the same size WordPress theme and starter website on each of these domains to provide a fair and accurate reading. I then monitor the page speed and uptime of each of these websites every 30 minutes for 1 whole year. We also hired someone to cache the websites weekly and update the plugins and themes in order to prevent outdated plugins or themes that could cause conflict with the websites. I then recorded the uptime of the server and recorded every time the server went down for 1 year using Pingdom. Pingdom is a web hosting monitor that records everything about your website and is known to be the best resource for monitoring web hosts. For this test, I'll be breaking these web hosts up by sections. The first section, I'll be talking about shared hosting. The second, I'll be talking about cloud hosting. And the third, we'll be talking about managed cloud hosting. Plus, as a bonus, I've also tested all of the Cloudways hosting providers, and I'll provide these results later in the video. Now, if you're not sure what these web hosting types mean, don't worry because I have a full video explaining each type of web hosting, and I'll put that in the description of this video for you to watch later. For this test, I'll be mainly focusing on 3 specific categories: page speed, uptime, and server response time. Page speed is the time it takes for your website to load. The lower the number, the faster the server. Server uptime is the total time that your server was online and running properly. It's used to measure the reliability of your web hosting. The higher the uptime, the more reliable the web host is. Lastly, server response time. This is the time it takes for a web browser to receive a response from the server. The lower the number, the faster the server. So even with these results, how do you know if your web hosting is fast or reliable? Google recommends your website should be loading at under 3 seconds. Anything above this will cause you to lose visitors, have a high bounce rate, and you can also lose SEO rankings. A study done by Dun & Bradstreet suggests web hosting companies on average should have an annual uptime with at least 99.50%. Anything below this is below average in the web hosting industry, and you should probably change your web host. And before we begin, I wanted to address a myth that you will commonly see when shopping for web hosting. Most companies today offer various packages. You'll see terms like unlimited storage space or unmetered bandwidth. This is simply not true. These companies do have a limit when it comes to web hosting. You should always ask the web hosting company how much bandwidth or space is included in the package, but most of these companies offer a reasonable amount of space and bandwidth that's practical for all users. I'll also be talking about renewal fees. It's important to know that when you sign up for a web hosting company, you're only paying for the first year sales price, then your plan renews at a higher cost. Now that's just something to consider when you're shopping for web hosting. Now this web hosting test costs us about $5,000 to make every year. It's pretty expensive, but we do this because we want to provide real value for the audience. So if you guys do decide to purchase from any of these web hosting companies, we have links and discounts in the description below of this video. And if you guys do use our links, it does help us to continue to make these videos for you all for free. All right, enough talking. Let's go ahead and take a look at our shared web hosting. First up, GoDaddy. GoDaddy is probably the largest web host in the world. On average, their site's loaded at around 2.39 seconds with an annual uptime of 99.69%, which ain't that bad. I'll be honest, this company has definitely improved from last year, but it's still not one of my favorites. Next up, A2 Hosting. Again, another surprise for me. A2 Hosting has dramatically increased performance from last year with an average load time of 1.17 seconds and an annual uptime of 99.97%. Good for them. They're not a bad option if you're looking for web hosting to get started with WordPress. Next up, ChemiCloud. ChemiCloud had a load time of 2.47 seconds with an annual uptime of 99.99%, which is actually very impressive. I'll be honest with you guys, I never really used this company and I just kind of threw them on the list to see what they can do, but they didn't do bad at all. Next up is good old HostGator, another terrible web host. If you see this company, run. HostGator had an average load time of 12.79 seconds, which is terrible. but they did have an annual uptime of 99.87%, which isn't the worst. HostGator is owned by EIG, which is known for buying small web hosting companies, watering them down in exchange to appease their shareholders. I would avoid all companies managed by EIG. The service always seems to decline with EIG companies. Next up, Hostinger. Hostinger had some great speeds, with their load time being around 938 ms, which is under 1 second, yet they did have an average uptime of 99.82%. I personally recommend this company on my other YouTube channels, and the users seem to love it. They are the only hosting company on this entire list that offers 40 languages on their website. Next up, InMotion. I gotta be honest, InMotion just doesn't perform well. InMotion had an average load time of 4.96 seconds with an annual uptime of 99.80. I really haven't seen this company improve at all from last year, and I just couldn't find any reason to recommend it. And next up, GreenGeeks. GreenGeeks is definitely sporadic. Sometimes they perform great, others not the best. GreenGeek had an average load time of 4.08 seconds with an average annual uptime of 99.95%. This company has mixed results, but they do have some good server response time to make up for it. Next up, SiteGround. SiteGround has definitely raised some controversy this year with some price adjustments, but they've changed their plans back to normal pricing. Websites on average load at around 1.65 seconds and had an average uptime of 99.62%. Although SiteGround did make some questionable decisions this year regarding their pricing plans, I do think they are on the road to improvement, and I do recommend them. Next up is another really underrated web host, KnownHost. KnownHost websites on average load at around 1.16 seconds with a 99.97% of annual uptime. Just one thing, their backend seems a little outdated, but they have always seemed to be a very legit web host. Next, HostPapa. This one pains me. HostPapa on average had load times of around 3.66 seconds, but they had a very low annual uptime with only 98.21%. Yikes. I would have to say avoid this hosting company. Next, Ionis. This company has trouble with branding. Last year they were more of that corporate only approach, trying to attract large ticket clients, and now they're kind of geared for everybody, or that whole GoDaddy approach. I'm not sure what they're going to do next year. They had an average load time of 3.1 seconds with an annual uptime of 99.98%. Not bad. Next up, FastComet. Known for their dedicated hosting, FastComet's shared servers perform pretty well. FastComet had an average load time of 3.38 seconds with an average annual uptime of 99.97%. I've used their service before for dedicated hosting, but not for shared, but it doesn't seem like a bad option. Here we go, another EIG company, Bluehost. Bluehost on average load time was 4.71 seconds, which is quite slow, and an annual uptime of only 99.42%. The downtime alone with this company is pretty bad, and if you are with these guys, I would make the switch to pretty much anybody. Next on the list, Host Armada. A very adequate company at best. Host Armada's website loaded at around 3.92 seconds with an annual uptime of 99.91%. Not the best, not the worst, but they do have some good server response time. Yet another company to avoid, DreamHost. I did have high hopes for this company, but sadly, they just didn't perform well. DreamHost websites on average load at around 5.02 seconds with an annual uptime of 98.54%, which is just terrible. Make sure to hide from these guys. Alright, so that pretty much sums up the shared hosting. The companies I would recommend on this list would have to be A2 Hosting, ChemiCloud, KnownHost, SiteGround, and my top pick would be Hostinger. I have used this company a lot throughout the year on my YouTube channels, and they have a good history of being consistent with their speeds and good pricing. Their speeds are good and they can improve on the uptime, but overall, I feel confident recommending them. Next, we'll be talking about cloud hosting, and I'll break this section down into a little bit more detail, but cloud hosting I currently recommend over all type of web hosting. It's kind of really affordable and it's actually really fast. So let's take a look at some of these cloud hosting companies that we monitored. First up, Liquid Web. This company recently had a merger with a company called Nexus, which can lead to a lot of confusion. Essentially, they are the same company. So if you go to Liquid Web, you'll basically be referred to Nexus. Liquid Web had an average load time of 1.31 seconds and had an average annual uptime of 99.99%. I like the pricing plans at Liquid Web because they're very diversified for pretty much beginners all the way to the end of people receiving millions of visitors. The most ideal plan is a designer plan, which can host up to 10 websites with 4 terabytes of bandwidth for around $50 a month. They also do provide phone support, which is pretty cool. Their backend dashboard is really easy to understand, and you'll see your invoices right away when you log in. Overall, I do like their dashboard. It's simple and easy to follow. I do think they need to clarify the differences between Nexus and Liquid Web, or just completely change the website to only one website. Next up, WPX Hosting. WPX Hosting had an average load time of 892 ms with an annual uptime of 99.85%, which is not bad at all. Now, due to our technical problems, we only recorded up to the last 4 months, but that can still give you a general idea of how their services are. Now, the only drawback with WPX is these guys are very expensive. Their monthly plans start around $25 a month and go all the way up to $100 per month. The difference between the plans is the number of websites you can install. On the basic plan, you can have 5 websites installed, and on the elite plan, you can have up to 35 websites installed. The space is also pretty limited with WPX, and they only give you 40 gigs on the most expensive plan. Their backend and login is custom made. At first, it can be a little confusing, but after you get the hang of it, you can install WordPress pretty simply. What's also really cool is the company's involved with a website called Every Dog Matters, which aims to shelter dogs that are homeless and find homes for them. That's a pretty cool project, and I like what they're doing over there. Overall, it's not a bad web host. I do think the specs are a little weak for the price you're paying, but the speed definitely makes up for it. Next up, Namehero. This is my personal favorite. On average, my websites load at around 770 ms with an annual uptime of 99.99%, which is very, very impressive. This is the hosting company that I personally recommend on my own YouTube channel, and also for all of my WordPress tutorials, and users seem to love it. I randomly stumbled on this company a few years ago when they only sold reseller hosting. They have now switched their model to cloud hosting primarily, and it's working really well for them. What I like most about Namehero is the prices. Now, these are special promo prices that are only available through my link, and the owner gave me this discount exclusively for my viewers. The starter cloud plan starts around $2.40, and their business cloud plan goes up to $9. I think the Turbo Cloud is the best deal because you get access to the new NVMe storage, and you can also host unlimited websites for just around $6 a month. And for just $100 a year, I think that's probably one of the best deals on the internet. They've also dramatically improved their backend and customer portal from their outdated one. It's really easy to see your domains, your plans, and your billing information. Namehero also does have a very easy setup wizard with a quick install for WordPress. You simply go get your domain, you press quick install, and you'll have your website up and running in a few clicks. They also do have tons of 5-star positive reviews, which you can simply find anywhere on the internet. The owner, Ryan Gray, is pretty involved with the community and with his company, and you can usually find them on YouTube creating tutorials to streamline the hosting process. I got a lot of requests to do the hosting or cloud, so I decided to give it a try. The speed of hosting or cloud, on average, they had a load time of 1.68 seconds, and their average uptime was around 99.99%. However, these results are only for 30 days due to some technical problems, but that still gives you a general idea. What I like most is the plans. Here you pay for what you get. For the Cloud Professional plan, you get up to 4 CPUs, 6 gigs of RAM, and you can host quite a bit of websites for just $19 a month. The only drawback here is the renewal fee is a little high. I also do like their backend interface. It's really easy to understand, it's quick, and if you're new to cloud web hosting, you shouldn't have too many problems. Now that pretty much sums it up for cloud web hosting, and if you're gonna ask me who do I recommend on that list, it would have to go to Namehero. They have great speeds, really good uptime, and they are the most affordable company on that whole list. I do have an exclusive discount for Namehero, and I'll leave that in the description below of this video. And lastly, let's talk about managed web hosting. Now, I've been getting a lot of requests to do managed web hosting. So what I did was I tested a lot of the big brands, including Cloudways and all of the hosting platforms that Cloudways has to offer. Now, one quick note, if you're a beginner with web hosting, I do not recommend managed web hosting. You'll have to point your own name servers and also migrate your own websites because these companies do not sell domains. However, if you are a beginner, I would definitely go with something like Namehero. They're fast and reliable. But if you're looking to upgrade from your traditional like shared hosting or something like that to managed, it's definitely worth it. So let's take a look at my results for the managed web hosting. First up, Kinsta. Kinsta has been around for quite some time. Their average load time was 1.34 seconds and an annual uptime of 99.99%. The only drawback with Kinsta is they are probably the most expensive hosting provider on this entire list. For $100 a month, you can host up to 5 WordPress installs. You get around 30 gigs of disk space. However, they've always maintained a good reputation in the hosting industry. They're not a bad option if you can afford it. Next up, WP Engine. Another reputable web hosting company that's been around for quite some time. WP Engine had an average load time of 849 ms and an annual uptime of 99.99%. WP Engine now offers 4 different plans, and to be honest, I'm not really sure the differences between these hosting plans. For this specific test, I just used the managed hosting. The plans start at $25 a month and go up. The best deal would probably be the growth plan, which allows you to host up to 10 websites for around $95 a month. If you do go with WP Engine, I would contact them first and find out the differences between each plan just to make sure you pick the right hosting for your website. Now, this is a long awaited test and I've gotten tons of requests to do this, so I'm really excited to bring you guys these results. So next up, Cloudways. Now, just to be clear, Cloudways is more of a portal to hosting your website on large scale platforms that are too technical for the average user. Basically, Cloudways simplifies the process of managing the hosting for you, and you pick the provider you'd like to be hosted on. Also note that we purchased the base or lowest plan of every provider to provide the most accurate test possible. Cloudways offers 5 different hosting providers: DigitalOcean, Linode, Vultr, Amazon AWS, and also the Google Cloud. I'll first go through each individual hosting provider and then give you a table so you can compare each hosting provider side by side. One quick note, our hosting monitor only recorded up to the last 4 months because we recently added them, but that still gives you a good idea of the speeds and reliability. So first up, DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean had an average load time of 664 ms with 0 downtime. Very impressive. We chose the DigitalOcean Premium, which essentially just uses CPUs with more speed. Their plans are actually pretty well priced. You can get hosting for as little as $12 a month, and they have plans for just about everybody. Their base plan is still pretty good, offering 25 gigs of storage and 1 terabyte of bandwidth. You can host as many WordPress websites you want with these plans, just as long as you don't exhaust the monthly resources. Overall, DigitalOcean is a solid pick to go with. Next up, Linode. Strangely, they perform probably the worst on my list, with an average load time of 2.96 seconds. However, they also did have 100% uptime. Quite honestly, I'm not sure why the load time is so high, but we triple checked the website and everything seemed to be running just fine on our ends. Their plans are similar to DigitalOcean, and also the specs are pretty much the same. Next up, Vultr. This is probably the most requested hosting company that my viewers asked me to monitor, and they did not disappoint. Vultr had an average load time of 704 ms and an average uptime of 100%. The results are pretty much identical to DigitalOcean's. Their pricing is also identical to DigitalOcean's, and they have the same exact pricing. However, Vultr does have the advantage here because they offer 50% more storage on every plan than DigitalOcean. Overall, I think the pricing, the speed, the bandwidth with Vultr is just an amazing deal. Next up, Amazon AWS. Amazon AWS had an average load time of 1.46 seconds, and they also had 100% uptime over the last 4 months. The only drawback with Amazon is they're a lot more expensive than the other plans. However, their top plans do have the most specs out of all the servers, but I think that's a little overkill and really not for everybody. Amazon AWS does have a good reputation with solid web hosting, but I think you could find better prices with Vultr or DigitalOcean. And lastly, Google Cloud. Google had an average load time of 1.58 seconds with 100% uptime as well. The pricing for Google Cloud has been a little bit more pricey. Personally, I've never really been a fan of Google Cloud. I just feel like you can get better performance somewhere else. The results aren't bad, so it's really all about your preference. Now, these are the 5 hosting providers that I monitored with Cloudways. I think all 5 of them are pretty good with 100% uptime, and they do vary between price and speed. I think the clear winners here are DigitalOcean and Vultr. The price is very affordable, the results are great, the amount of storage is reasonable, and the bandwidth makes it an ideal pick for any type of WordPress website. We do have a 20% discount code in the description of this video for any of these hosting plans. And if you guys do decide to use our link in the description, it does help us to continue to create these web hosting tests for free. Now, out of these 5 web hosting providers, the one I recommend is, are you ready? Vultr. The speed is great and the uptime is even better, and they do give you a good amount of storage. Basically, you can't go wrong with this company. However, DigitalOcean was just as good, so I do think they deserve some recognition as the best runner-up because remember, we are comparing milliseconds here and we would never see the speed difference with the human eye. So let's take a look at the hosting companies I recommend. So if you're on a very small budget, I would recommend shared hosting with Hostinger. If you want fast performance at a budget, I would definitely go with Namehero. They're the ones I currently recommend on my YouTube channel. And if you want to go with managed hosting, I would definitely go with Cloudways Vultr high frequency plan, or even the DigitalOcean plan. Those are my top picks for the best web hosting this year.